when we were doing school breakfast here at ACNJ, and we were at a school in Trenton, and you walked up the street to the school, and there were kids, I don't know, fifth, sixth grade, saying, "Good morning. Hi, ma'am," whatever. And you got to the front door, and the principal was standing at the front door and welcome everyone in. And we initially thought it was because we had a program there. And it turns out, no, they do that every single day. And you go into the school, and there's a lot of artwork. There were a lot of signs for Ivy League colleges. They all had a certain day of the week that they all wore their school colors. I mean, you could just tell there was a lot of enthusiasm. Would you say that's the type of school where kids have better opportunities for learning because they're engaged?
What we've learned is that what you've described is best practice. It's not exceptional practice. It's best normal educational practice. To greet kids when they walk in the door is essential. We know it's essential. There's a lot of data from places like the Northeast Foundation for Children and the Responsive Classroom that show how kids respond to how they're greeted, which was related to the story I told about the metal detectors in New Brunswick. We hosted a group of educators from Singapore in New Jersey. They wanted to see what we're doing in our schools for social emotional learning and character development. And one of the things that was fascinating to us was that even though we were talking with them, their eyes were looking up at the walls. And we kept wondering, why are you spending so much time looking at the walls? And they said, in our schools, the most important things and messages are on the walls. And we said, that's interesting. And so we started going into these classrooms, and in the schools that were designated as schools of character, where things are going well, they had a lot of stuff on their walls about friendship, about how we get along with each other, about steps to calm yourself down when you're upset. The walls spoke. And in November of 2025, I went to Singapore to do some work with their Ministry of Education, and I visited some of their schools. But stuff all over their walls about character, about citizenship, about the kind of citizen we want you to be, and the expectation of every student to be able to be that kind of citizen. And then they recognized students who participated in different things. I mean, their walls were just covered with stuff.
That's wonderful. So I know I read about that visit because of your book, The Reinvigorating the Classroom Climate, right? And in this book, you do put in a lot of examples of schools. So what does it take to create that climate in which kids will thrive and then learn?
It takes the belief that creating that climate is fundamental to learning. That it's not an aside, it's not an extra, it's not even optional. It is absolutely essential for academic achievement. And I'm going to put one additional word on there, for lasting academic achievement. Because I think all of us have had the experience of cramming for a test.
No.
And doing well and forgetting everything. So you can have achievement. You can get your test scores up. There have been examples in the news about schools that have gotten their test scores up miraculously, and then you don't hear about them anymore because it was just the flash in the pan. But if you want lasting learning, you have to create the conditions under which kids are truly learning, identifying with the material, bringing it into themselves. There's a lot of talk about culturally responsive learning. And what that really means is that kids learn best when they see themselves reflected in what's going on. That they're learning when they see examples of kids like themselves, people like themselves. In the learning material, they internalize it more. They take those lessons to heart. And that's what we want our kids to do. So you have to believe that for lasting learning, to create the kind of graduates that we want to have, to become the kind of citizens that we want to have, we have to realize that their social, emotional, and character development is as important as anything else. Teddy Roosevelt once said, to educate a person in mind and not in morals is to create a menace to society.
Oh, that's interesting.
Isn't that interesting? And if you think about it, the last thing we want are really smart people with very poor character. We see them in government today a lot, and it's not doing anybody any favors.
Okay, so let's think about how in these examples in your book, how people created those environments, right? So there's a role for the administration. They have to kind of make the commitment and allow it to happen, right? What else do they need to do?
They need to give teachers the opportunity and space to work together to figure out how we're going to do this in our classroom. How are we going to create environments where our kids can feel more welcomed, more engaged? A lot of teachers are already doing this to one extent or another, but they often don't have the opportunity to share and talk about it. And so giving that opportunity leads more teachers to get different ideas about the kinds of things they can do. Part of it comes down to the way we greet kids when they walk in. Part of it also is how we get the kids to explore their own personal agenda for learning. So one of the things we talk about is the importance of kids identifying with their sense of purpose. When we were working in New Brunswick, we asked the kids, how many of you thought you were going to have a happy and healthy life? And during one of our surveys, 50% of the kids thought they would, and 50% of the kids thought they wouldn't.
That's very sad.
It is very sad, but also it's a call out to us, because how can you expect a kid to want to learn something if they don't see any value in it? Mm-hmm. If I'm not going to lead a healthy life, why should I worry about my eating habits? Why should I avoid taking drugs? Why should I avoid smoking? I'm not going to be around that long for it to be an issue. So we need our kids to feel like they have a sense of positive purpose. We need to be talking to kids as part of the subject matter that we talk about is to talk about who does that subject matter. History is not just a set of facts. It's people taking actions in different contexts. Science isn't just things that get discovered. They're scientists that work in laboratories, that went to schools like they go to school. And the artists, mathematicians, writers, we need kids to be able to identify a sense of positive purpose for themselves so that they will feel motivated to want to work. And also, one of the other things that we find in schools that are successful, and we have lots of examples in the book, is kids working together. In our academic circles, we're very big on individual grades as a way of who did what. But in the world that we're all living in, nobody does anything by themselves. Everybody works in a group. Everybody's part of a team. And we need kids to have that experience of learning as part of a group, learning as part of a team, and being able to be open to your classmates' ideas. So one of the things we find that's very interesting that we've asked kids to do is when they're about to be introduced to a new unit in school, let's say they're going to be reading a book of fiction, give them a statement. I think I'm going to understand this book well. And then you ask them, how many kids agree with this statement? How many of you disagree with this statement? And how many of you are not sure? And so you're asking a kid to sort of look into the future and think about, how am I gonna figure out this book? Some kids say yes, some kids say no, some kids say maybe. We get all the kids who said yes, no, and maybe together, and the yeses talk to each other. Well, why do you think you're going to be able to understand this book? The no's, why do you think you're not going to be able to understand this book? Kids who aren't sure, well, why aren't you sure? And then they share their reasoning. And so all of a sudden we hear why I think I'm going to understand this book, I have to articulate my hesitations about why I think I'm not going to understand this book. And I also hear from the people who aren't sure. And all of a sudden, when kids get the opportunity to hear their peers, what they think, their uncertainties, their certainties, their reasons, it opens up their way of thinking in very positive ways and helps kids feel more engaged with the work that they're going to be doing.
So that raises two questions for me. One, what do you say to a teacher who says, we don't have time for that? And also, what do you do for a teacher who doesn't or may not think they have the skills to have that conversation in class, or they might feel they're going to lose control of their class if they really let kids have these open conversations?
Yeah. Well, we've done lots of this stuff over many, many, many years. And there is nothing in that kind of conversation that is beyond what a competent teacher can do.
Okay.
I mean, teachers are supposed to be having conversations with their kids. And these aren't difficult conversations because you're not arguing with the kids. You're simply letting the kids formulate an opinion, share their opinion. You're not saying what's right and what's wrong. You're basically giving the kids an opportunity to think differently and to learn what their peers are talking about and to connect with their peers in a different way. Is it worth the time? Doesn't take that much time, first of all, to do. And second of all, it's like a down payment. And so if you do invest this time, all of the subsequent lessons about this book are going to go better. They're going to go more smoothly. You're going to get back instructional time. This is one of the things that people often don't realize. And it's one of the problems with prevention, right? If you take out the time to try to prevent something, well, then you're not dealing with the difficulties later on. When you say, I don't have time to prevent something, well, you're going to pay the price later on in the work you're going to have to do because you didn't prevent difficulties. The typical situation is dealing with kids' stress management, right? I don't have time to teach my kids a stress management strategy, a teacher might say. Well, if you don't have time to teach them the strategy, you're going to be spending much more time as the kids have these bad stress reactions. Once you invest a little time up front in teaching the kids stress management techniques, it pays off because you can have them use those techniques throughout all the rest of the day. So, that's where I think the administrators become so important in giving the teachers the permission, if not the requirement, to invest in these preventive strategies.
And you could teach those strategies to the whole class, right?
Absolutely. Okay. Every kid needs to have a stress management strategy.
Is that the same when people talk about mindfulness training? Is that stress management?
It's one approach. It's one approach to stress management. But yes, it's the same kind of thing. And there are schools that begin their school day with a mindful moment across the entire school population. And they find, and data supports this, that the day goes better.
Because it makes kids sort of focus.
It makes them focus, and it also serves as a transition from whatever they're coming in with to school to the learning tasks ahead. It's like a cleansing breath.
So I think of sometimes we've talked in Trenton and Newark to groups of dads, and there's street teams, they call them, right? And they really are just out a block or so away from the school saying to kids, it's okay. Everything's okay. So that's sort of that same thing, checking it in so they leave whatever was going on the way to school outside.
Right. I mean, because they can't really leave it outside.
No.
It's not like they put their books in the locker, or they put their feelings in the locker. They bring their feelings with them. But if we create other environments, those positive feelings predominate. I mean, kids are like adults. They don't really want to be miserable. If you give them half a chance, they won't be miserable. And so if we engage them in school and we create a positive environment and we create that sense of appreciation and welcoming, they respond to that. Now, again, there are some kids for whom it takes a lot more for them to feel that sense of welcoming and engagement. And that's why we have school counselors. That's why, we can't expect that this is going to work for every kid. Some kids are dealing with extraordinary stress. One of the things that we've taken to saying is that there's a lot of talk now about trauma-informed learning. And this is something that, honestly, I learned at Rutgers through feedback from my students during COVID, that students that I wouldn't suspect what was going on in their lives would share with me what was going on in their lives. And then I'm thinking, in a typical classroom, if you don't have that vehicle for sharing, you don't know what's going on.
Right.
But such a high percentage of students were dealing with trauma that the default, in my opinion, is to think that these kids are dealing with trauma and everything isn't fine. And we have to make the extra effort to help them feel welcomed and supported and cared for. Because if we don't, their feelings from outside are going to remain strong inside, and it just serves as a barrier to learning.
So you had mentioned early on, and I made myself a note about resources, right? And you talk about school counselors. Well, I know, again, from some of our Kids Count that, and I'm just looking here at my notes, that there's sometimes ratio of school counselors to students is 300 students to one counselor, right? Or 400. So how does that person even begin to identify the kids who might need extra help? Or do we need more school counselors? Like, what's the answer?
Yeah, well, we definitely need more school counselors, right? The job of the school counselor is made easier when these kinds of social and emotional actions are being taken by the teachers. They don't eliminate it, but they reduce the flow. Counselors, unfortunately, have to do more group work. There's no choice for them. They can't see the volume of kids individually. But one of the things that we encourage the counselors to do, wherever they can, is to try to go from a deficit-oriented approach to a strengths-oriented approach. So I'll give you an example. You got kids who are angry, upset, etc. Put them into an anger management group. Try to teach them anger management skills. In my experience, that only tends to make kids angry because they don't want to be singled out. They don't want to be told to manage their anger. So what we suggest counselors do is to create a positive context in which the kids can learn to manage their anger. So, for example, one of the things we've done is to have them create a newspaper club. So these kids who would otherwise be in an anger management group are told, you are in a newspaper club and you are going to create a newspaper for the school. But before you can go out and do this, we have to ask this question. What skills do you need to be a good newspaper reporter? And so the kids then start to answer, well, I need to be organized. I need to be responsible. I need to listen. We also say that it's probably not a good idea to smack your interviewees. It just helps build rapport. The kids end up, when you ask them, listing all the things that they would do in an anger management group. But instead, they're being asked to learn these skills so that they can run a newspaper club. It's a complete positive reframing for the kids. They respond far better. It's far easier to do, much more fun to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids feel much better about it. You never have a waiting list for kids wanting to get into an anger management group.
No.
But you do have kids on a waiting list to want to be part of the newspaper club.
Interesting.
Yeah. And the kids then all of a sudden look different to the other kids. And they're not going off to anger management group. They've got some responsibility. They've got some status, right? Wherever counselors can reframe into a more positive approach, a service-oriented approach, where the kids are being seen as contributors and not deficits, they'll have an easier time with what they're doing.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out the full conversation by clicking the link in the top right corner or the link in the description. And be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you enjoyed the video and want to be updated when our new interviews are released.